G'day guys, or welcome to this episode of Aussie English. Today I have Ross McGibbon, who is a snake enthusiast, or would you call yourself a reptile enthusiast? Do you pick a team, or...?
No, mate. Snakes are probably my favourite out of all reptiles. They're definitely what I focus on mainly, but I'm definitely a reptile enthusiast. I guess an amateur herpetologist. I study them in my spare time.
Yeah, brilliant.
And then, the wildlife photography as well.
Well, that's it. So the first question I have for you is, where are you from and where did you grow up down under? And what do you do for a crust? What's your day job versus the photography thing?
Well, originally I'm in WA in Fremantle at the moment. I've been here for the last 2 years, but I'm a Queensland boy, as you might be able to tell by my very Queensland accent. And I grew up in kind of a lot of different parts of Queensland, the Gold Coast for 10 years, and then Mum shipped us out to Emerald, Queensland, which is a couple hours inland of Rockhampton. So country town, big mining town, and we ended up on a farm out there. So a bit of a farm background, and then obviously later in life joined the Army when I was 20, joined as a firefighter, and I've basically stuck with that career the whole time.
Yep.
And then about 3 years ago, I just combined my passion for wildlife photography, traveling, and then reptiles all into one sort of hobby, and then just started doing wildlife photography on the side.
Far out. So when I was a kid, my parents used to always take me to my grandparents' farm in Bendigo, and it was always dry, rocks everywhere, really flat rocks, so they were the perfect kind for lifting up and finding snakes and spiders and lizards and stuff. Were you doing that ever since you were a little kid?
Well, for me, it started off with dinosaurs. I was absolutely obsessed with dinosaurs, and then once we got moved up to Emerald, I started to realise that, I started to be out in the bush more, and I started to realise that, hey, these reptiles are like living versions, miniature versions of dinosaurs. So my obsession sort of quickly went from dinosaurs over to reptiles, and I was one of those kids at school that was just sneaking out of class to be in the bush all the time and catching reptiles and doing the same sort of thing, you might have been doing as a kid, just being out in the bush and enjoying, whatever I could find. And then when I was about 11 years old, we moved out to a farm. Obviously, my mum sort of started up a relationship with a guy who was a farmer, and that was a big contrast to what, firstly, he had the mentality of, any snake, a good snake's a dead snake, basically.
That's pretty much all farmers, right?
Pretty much all farmers, they don't bother learning about them. They don't care. They just see them as a pest. They don't see them as native wildlife. And basically, they kill them all, regardless of whether they're non-venomous, venomous, a legless lizard even.
Are they allowed to do that? That's one of those questions that I hear about. I worked at the museum when I was doing my my studies, and we did quite a lot of surveys. We'd have to go out into, the Grampians and into the Alps here in Victoria and catch everything. And I remember quite often they were saying, because they'd talk to farmers and they'd be like, I just kill them. And they're like, that's like a $20,000 fine, if you kill one of these animals and people find out about it. So what are the sort of rules with that?
Well, this is the thing. There's a bit of a grey area. So first and foremost, all native wildlife in Australia is protected, including every species of reptile, including snakes. If you kill one of these snakes indiscriminately and someone has the proof, to then pass on to the Environmental Protection Agency or whatever government body is in that state. If they have the proof, then they can you can then receive a fine. But there's a grey area that says you can protect your personal safety with whatever means necessary. So people sort of take that on board and they go, all right, well, there's a loophole here. I can kill snakes because snakes are aggressive. And all they have to do is say, I feared for my life, I feared for my family's life, and they can indiscriminately kill snakes. What it really means is if a snake is advancing towards you in a threatening behaviour, you can grab whatever's nearest to defend yourself. That is allowed. What it doesn't include is seeing a snake down in the chook pen, running up to the house, grabbing a gun, going down and shooting that snake just for being a snake. And that's
really?
what.
So even that you can't do on your own property.
No. So they're protected wildlife, and that does come under, the law that you cannot go and kill that animal just for being there or just for being a snake. But again, there's those loopholes. and what people do on their own property is very rarely ever seen by the general public, and they can get away with it. So that's sort of where that sort of behaviour comes about, and it's a mentality that's taught from kids from a young age in the country. The older parents, they're not learning anything about the natural, and I'm being very generalist here.
Yeah.
And I'm speaking from my experience from what my stepfather was like. They only know agricultural upbringings. They don't really know about the natural world. Their family and their generations have changed the land many years before. They've cleared it. They've destroyed a lot of the natural habitat for natural wildlife. Then you get these snakes that feed on rats and mice, like brown snakes and taipans and species like that. And then they're attracted to the home because, farmers are feeding their chickens with grain. They've got all their horse feed in their hay and all this stuff that creates a great environment for rats and mice to breed, right? Then you've got the snake who used to have all this land and now it's all cleared and it's still trying to survive. So it's trying to eke out this existence in a very altered landscape to what it was. But what they're doing is providing this great food source that then those snakes can come and exploit. Plus, they've got so much mess and rubbish and tin laying around.
Yeah.
You've got all these great hiding spots because they don't keep any of it clean and tidy.
That was always one of those things that I was always thinking, because I interviewed a guy from Queensland, from the Sunshine Coast, who was a snake hunter, and he was talking about how he'd always get called out to houses, and it's always, they just leave tin and wood piles, and it's like, man, that is the perfect thing you need to do if you want to attract snakes to your house, is just leave a heap of flat tin panels that are going to warm up in the day, flat on the grass.
Yeah. And what they don't understand is snakes need to thermoregulate, so their whole makeup is designed to operate off being at an optimum body temperature. So if they can remain very safe underneath a piece of tin that then warms up under the sun and they don't have to expose themselves, that's a perfect shelter site for them. When they're warm enough, they'll come out to hunt, and you've just created this perfect storm to have snakes by having a really messy property, all these rats and mice running around.
So is that a lot of your work too, when you're out, creating these videos on YouTube and taking these amazing photos? Is a lot of your work also interacting with people and trying to educate them personally on that sort of behavior and avoiding those kinds of things to be safer around their properties, and not just, I'll do whatever I want, and if a snake's there, I'm going to kill it?
That is, first and foremost, what I started out doing. On the Sunshine Coast, I became a professional snake catcher. So, like the guy you were talking about before, it was my full-time role when I wasn't being a firefighter. Basically, on my days off, I was a full-time snake catcher. And we get up to 10 jobs a day on the Sunshine Coast. It's a very populated area for snakes, not to scare anyone. It's just got a very rich biodiversity. If
you don't like snakes, guys, come to Victoria. You'll be fine. There's very few of them.
Yeah, well, we'd be out educating a lot of the public on our snake calls, but it wasn't really enough. And then you've got these phenomenal tools like Facebook, where old snake educators used to have to go to schools and educate 20 kids at a time.
Yep.
Now, just by creating a video on Facebook, you can put it out there for the world to see. And I've just put one out recently about brown snakes chasing people and explaining that. And you might have caught that one. And, that's had about nearly 9,000 shares. And it's had a lot of positive feedback because it helps people understand snakes more, because they're very, very misunderstood animals.
Well, talking about that, why are Australian snakes so dangerous when we move on to this topic? Why are they so venomous? And why are they so misunderstood as well, to get you going?
Cool. Well, venomous and dangerous are two different things. Obviously, everyone's heard about how much we have such toxic snakes in Australia. But the problem is those tests have been performed on mice. So there was a thing called the LD50 test, which they did. I can't remember exactly what year, but it was some time ago. And what they did is they tested all the snake venoms on mice. And now what they did is they've come up with a list from those results of the top, say, 25 most venomous snakes in the world. And Australia has, a good 15 or 20 of those in that list. Now, everyone thinks now that, we've got these super, super toxic snakes. But what they don't quite understand is that those results don't exactly correlate over to humans. They're performed on mice.
Yep.
I'll give you a good example of how it really doesn't work in the sense that everyone thinks it is. You've got the Sydney funnel web spider who can kill a human, but yet its venom is very ineffective on mice. So now if you test all these snake venoms on mice, you're going to come up with this, very scary looking results towards humans, and we really can't sort of correlate the two. We can only sort of pick out certain things that does. So anyway, Australia's got this massive reputation for having all these venomous snakes. What we don't understand is that statistics prove that we only have an average of 2 snake bite deaths a year, which is very low.
That's one of those things, sorry to interrupt you, that always blows my mind. When I was looking up some of the stats on animal-related deaths in Australia, all the animals that you would imagine aren't scary, are benign, are the ones that'll actually F you up and kill you at the end of the day, right? Like, I think it was like 30 deaths a year from horses. Kangaroos kill more people than sharks in car accidents. And so it is weird that it's completely skewed in that Australia has this kind of like, oh, we need to, wear as a badge of honour all these dangerous animals, they're deadly, watch out. But in actual fact, it's all these other animals like dogs and kangaroos and goats or whatever that'll actually kill people and not necessarily spiders, snakes, sharks.
Exactly. I was reading a big write-up on it not too long ago, and I think, all our venomous creatures, including snakes, crocodiles, not venomous, all our dangerous creatures, including our snakes, our crocodiles, our sharks, our dangerous marine life, it all amounts to about 5 deaths on average a year. And then you get something like, this cute little honeybee, this introduced honeybee killing 10 people a year. And, you got this really skewed mentality that we need to go out and kill all these snakes, but yet you've got all these honeybees flying around everyone's flowers and backyards and stuff, and you don't have the parents running out in a fit of like panic, killing all these honeybees like they would a snake, yet the snake, gets this really bad rap in Australia. So
imagine them going out there to fish and chip shops and just like beating the hell out of all of those all the dim sims and everything because they're causing obesity and heart disease.
Yeah. I mean, driving your car, we have around between 3,500, 4,500 car-related deaths. Yeah. That is phenomenal when you compare that to snakes. Yet, there's very little fear about jumping in your car and going down the street. You know what I mean?
Is there even a word for that kind of a phobia? I don't think anyone has a phobia of cars, but you've got arachnophobia. I'm sure there's phobias of sharks, and it is funny how it's kind of like irrational.
It is. It's very irrational, and that's what, as a snake educator and someone who puts a lot of time into learning about these topics, the more I learn, and the more crazy people on Facebook I meet, it's just staggering how many people just have this really skewed version of how dangerous, our native fauna is, when really all of that stuff needs to be preserved, and we could put our efforts into, doing more constructive things with our time instead of getting on Facebook and carrying on about how dangerous snakes are. Why not learn more about them so that you realise they're not so dangerous like a lot of the professionals do?
Well, what are some of the misconceptions that the average person that you encounter have with regards to snakes?
Basically, I'll start off with snakes being territorial. A lot of people will see a snake act defensively towards them, and they'll be like, oh, this snake is chasing me out of its territory. It's taken up residence in my home. It's marked that residence out as its territory, and now it's trying to chase me out of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go get my gun and kill it. Now, snakes are not territorial animals. What they have is a home range, just like you or I do. We live in a town. We know where our food is. We know where our shelter is. And we know, where the nightclubs are to go out and find females. But, if you correlate that to a snake, he has this home range. He kind of knows where everything is. He knows the habits of the occupants because he's grown up there. He or she, and they're only going to defend their personal safety. So when they confront a snake, everyone thinks, oh, this snake is attacking me, it's being aggressive at me. But what they're doing is they're just seeing defensive behavior, because it's very important to understand that snakes look up from the ground, they see this large animal, and in the wild, that's a predator to a large animal. So anything that's larger than them, they see as a threat to them. Even cars, I get these people going, oh, if they're not aggressive, then why was it striking at my car when I pulled up next to it on the road? And it's like, the snake doesn't have Google, and it can't on and see the latest model of Toyota and go, oh, that's not a person.
Yeah.
It just looks up, it sees something big and intimidating, and it just switches into defensive mode. That's all they do. And
well, that was really interesting when you showed that video recently with the brown snake, right? Can you explain what exactly was going on in that video and the point of it? Because it was really, really interesting.
Yeah, so for that particular video, we were out filming venomous snakes. We'd come across one on the road, and we got out to identify it as a brown snake. We're actually looking for inland taipans. We were right in the middle of Australia, in northeast South Australia, and
you got a death wish. You got a death wish, man.
Yeah, right out in the middle of nowhere and trying to muck around with snakes. But we got out, realised it was a brown snake. Thought, we'll just grab a quick bit of footage, because we try and film everything we come across, because you never know what the animal's going to do and how you'll be able to use that footage to sort of educate the public later on. So I went up behind it. My friend Richie was filming me, and as I got close to it, it did a 180, and that's where the video starts.
Yep.
It's done a 180 at me. It's advanced towards me in a defensive manner, thinking that I'm a large predator about to hurt it. As I walk backwards, and all I had to do was walk backwards, I didn't have to run, I didn't have to panic. I just walked backwards. The snake advanced towards me until it saw its first opportunity to flee, and that's when it ducked down that soil crack that you can see. And that was a perfect example of how a snake will act defensively towards you, try to get you on the back foot, get you to just basically leave it alone and get away. A lot of people mistake that behaviour for chasing, and they call it chasing because they believe that the snake is trying to advance towards them with intention to bite them, because everyone thinks that they want to bite you and kill you, and it's just not the case. They put on this big bluff display. A lot of it's mock striking and bluffing. A lot of it's even done with a closed mouth. And I've witnessed this many, many, many times while I've been out filming venomous snakes and as a snake catcher. I know that a lot of it's just bluff, but it can result in a bite if you do not leave it alone. So where accidents happen is if you don't see the snake, acts defensively towards you, and you keep moving around, it's just thinking, oh, this thing's trying to kill me. It acts defensively, and if you are close enough, they can result in a bite.
Yeah, because I've heard that quite often they're not actually interested in wasting venom on things they know are predators, because there's no real point, right? It's a waste of venom. They're not going to consume you, and they have to create that venom again to try and hunt later.
Exactly. You pretty much sort of nailed it on the head. Venom isn't really used by Australian snakes in defence. The only time that's really used is in things like your spitting cobras, and they've had, thousands and thousands more years of large predators to deal with. So they rear up and they spit up into the eyes of your perceived predator to
Fortunately, we got none of them here, except unless you go to a zoo and you're Harry Potter and the glass breaks or whatever, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we don't have to worry about any snakes spitting venom in our eyes. What we need to be wary of is just how to act when we do see a snake, and we can go on to that in a bit more. But just for the whole defensive snakes using venom for defensive purposes, there's no snake in Australia that can kill a human that quickly to stop it from killing the snake. Yeah. So its venom is absolutely useless as used in a defensive manner.
Yeah.
So first things first, they're not going to try and use that. But the thing is, a snake is a snake. It's a long cylindrical animal, and the only thing it has to defend itself is, bluff type behaviour and acting assertively, and then last resort, it may bite. And a good statistic I like to put out there is the Australian brown snake the eastern brown is the one that is responsible for the most amount of deaths in Australia. And that's the one that everyone fears, and that's why I did that video. But there's a statistic they've collected from snakebite history that brown snake will only envenom its victim or the bite victim around 20 to 40% of the time. Now,
so that means you can poke the thing between 3 and 5 times before you'll get done.
Yeah, you've basically, if we want to make a bit of a joke out of it, you've basically got the odds in your favour of mucking around with a snake. But to be more serious, that all that does is that statistic, it shows the general public that they're not trying to use venom as a defensive mechanism. The venom is only just a byproduct of them biting and the fact that they're venomous. So it put simply, that's the way it is. I do have another point.
You're good.
No, it's right. We'll move on. But yeah, put very, very simply, they're not trying to use venom for defensive purposes. That's what I wanted to say. If you were a rat, if you were one of its prey items, then it would envenomate 100% of the time because it's trying to use its venom on you. So we can all relax. We can realize that snakes aren't trying to prey on us. They're trying to defend their personal safety from us.
Yeah, it was always crazy. I used to have a black-headed python, and he was a bit of a nut job inside the cage. For some reason, he was very cage defensive. You get him out, and he was like a puppy, but in the cage, in his home, and I don't know if it was associated with this is my space, and when you come in, you're invading it. But he would always like strike. But again, I'd put my hand in there sometimes, and he'd hit my hand and not actually latch on. But then the moment that you put a rat in there that was, frozen dead, you put it in there and he would just completely change and just be as vicious as. And it was interesting seeing those two different kind of behaviours between the defensive go away kind of striking, but then when he's actually turned on and wants the thing that he's after.
Yeah, well, that's extremely easy to explain because you've got this snake in a confined space, so it can't really escape. It doesn't have that option. So that's where cage defensiveness comes in. The snake is cornered. It sees this big, sort of large, threatening-looking thing in front of it. It gets cage defensive. Then what comes in is their chemioreception. So they're very, very good at picking up scent particles of their prey items, and that's what they use their forked tongue for. As soon as you introduce the smell of that rat into the snake's environment, it just it switches into prey mode, and that's exactly the switch that you're talking about.
Seeing that is frightening, especially when you know you've held the rat in your hand. And like my girlfriend at the time would be like, "Oh, just feed him with your hand," and I'm like, "Screw that, dude! I'm using the tweezers. If he bites, he's not letting go."
Yeah, exactly, and that's why a lot of keepers are at risk if they don't use safe practices. And I'll talk about the inland taipan, for example. It's, going back to that list of the most toxic snakes in the world, it ranks as number one. But the very simple fact is it's in the middle of Australia and hardly encounters anyone.
Exactly.
So the only people that have been bitten by this snake are, guys like myself who have been out there trying to photograph it or study it. And then you've got the keepers that keep them in captivity, and they're the types of people that get bitten. So you got this snake with this really scary statistic that it's the most venomous snake in the world if you're mice or rats, and then no one's ever died from it.
Really? So no one's actually ever died from a taipan bite or an inland taipan bite?
Well, an inland taipan bite, yeah. People have definitely died from coastal taipans.
Yeah.
There's 1/3 species of taipan, which is called the Western Desert taipan, which is even more further inland if you're on the east coast. It's over in the Great Victoria Desert.
Yep.
That was a snake that I went and actually found last year and wrote an article for and got into Australian Geographic, which was a great feat.
Oh,
but
awesome.
Less than 20 people have actually encountered that snake in the wild because it's in such I should say less than 20 people involved in Western science. I'm sure the local Aboriginal people have been encountering that snake for thousands of years, but it was only known to science in 2007.
Oh wow, that recently,
yeah. And I guess that's why it was interesting to Australian Geographic, because they're like, cool, we need people to go and find out more about this snake. If you're going to go in there and take photos of it, we want to know about it. So
moving on to encounters, have you had any? Obviously, you've had a few sort of dodgy encounters. What happened, and what do you need to do if you want to get bitten by a snake? And what should you do to avoid it?
Well, when it comes to encountering snakes, I obviously shoot with a wide-angle lens, and I get very, very close to my subjects in order to show all of the detail and show the habitat that they live in, so I can then go and use those photos to tell the story. So I deal in close proximity to snakes, for long periods of time, and I get around Australia and I film as many as I can. So I've basically come across all of our, venomous species. Groups of venomous species: brown snakes, black snakes, tiger snakes, taipans. I've found all 3 taipans in Australia, which not many people have done. So I've got a wealth of experience with Australian venomous snakes, and that's what I'm trying to specialise in. It's my most important sort of interest. And from that, I've derived a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience from having these encounters. And now it's trying to get that knowledge out to the public because they're just so misunderstood. So to get back to your question, what you should do if you see a snake, don't do what I do, because I like to get very close and I like to photograph them. So don't do that for starters. But there's no reason why you can't walk away from any kind of snake encounter as long as you know the following steps. So this is an area of great confusion amongst the Australian public, because they get told one thing and then they get told another. But really, there's 2 methods you should do when you encounter a snake. If you see a snake at a distance, just leave it alone. Try and find an alternate route. Observe it if you're interested.
Use a zoom lens, not a wide-angle one.
Yeah, exactly. Now, if you're in close proximity to a snake, you've walked out of the chook shed and you're about to stand on one. If at all possible, the first thing you should do is remove yourself from the vicinity. But sometimes it's too late. That snake is already way too close for you. And what might happen is the snake might rear up and look at you because it's just noticed you. This is where the Australian public need to use their best judgment in this situation. If you can get out of there, the snake will go back to doing what it was doing. If the snake rears up at you, what it's best to do is stay completely still, because they're very responsive to movement. So the more you move around, the more that snake is going to then get defensive and react at you. So this is why killing snakes is such a dangerous activity. And there's a statistic out there that if you try and kill a snake, with hand tools and you're getting sort of close to these animals, you're provoking it. You're trying to kill it. It's going to defend itself.
Your likelihood of being bitten just went through the roof.
and the mentality of these people that kill these snakes, like, oh, I'm just protecting my family, you know what I mean? And you get this statistic out there that actually proves that, because the most amount of Australians that are bitten are these adult males trying to confront and kill the snake. So first things first, if you want to survive a snake encounter, don't try and kill it.
Yeah,
that's the first thing.
Call someone to remove it if it's on your property too, right?
Exactly. Like, this can create a little bit of a problem for people that are in rural areas.
Yep.
So that's why so many farmers just kill the snakes, because they just want them to be eliminated. But the problem is that it's a Band-Aid solution, so it's not actually solving their perceived snake problem.
It's pretty dumb, right? If you've got a heap of crap in your yard that they can live in, you've got heaps of rats and mice living around your house, killing one snake isn't going to tell the other snakes to not come in. It's like, oh, okay, there's space open now. No one's living here at this address. I'll move in. Yeah, that's pretty much what happens. You've created this niche for other snakes then to come and exploit. So imagine a bit of a case study. Let's say we follow a brown snake from birth. It knows exactly where as it grows up, it knows where the food is, it knows where the shelter is, it knows where the danger is. So it tries to stay out of your way because it doesn't want to be preyed upon. It wants to remain in secrecy so it can hunt and then go and live, in a hole somewhere. And they do a very good job at staying out of our way. So you take that brown snake who's lived in that area, and then all of a sudden he gets to adulthood, he gets big and he gets noticed, and farmer comes and kills the brown snake. Yeah.
What happens then is you've removed that top predator.
Who was keeping out the other 10 snakes.
From that environment. He's the top predator in his environment. He's cleaning up all your rats and mice that, if they are left to breed on their own, potentially can reach plague proportions and then affect your livelihood. They're eating all your dog food. They're eating all your crops. There has been instances where there's been plague proportions, and people have been overrun by mice. And I've even heard of a story about an old fellow who couldn't get out of bed, who had his ears, they started to eat him alive, basically.
Jesus.
Because he couldn't get out of bed. So these type of things can happen if you start to change the land so much and remove the top predators. Then it brings in other snakes. So other snakes say, oh, look, there's a food source there. there's so many of them, we need more snakes. So you might have more snakes in there. And this isn't to say it's going to happen every time, but this is basically what you're doing by just killing a snake because you fear and misunderstand it. You just don't know enough about the animal to go, oh, maybe we should leave this guy around and we should take a few other precautions. Now, I'm not saying, it's great to have a brown snake around because they do pose a risk to people if those people don't know how to live cohesively with snakes.
Especially if you've got kids, I imagine, or dogs or...
Yes. But the thing is that the whole, I'm protecting my kids mentality it's blown so much out of proportion because you'll get the odd child that is, say, bitten by a snake or even, in worst case scenario, and this is a tragedy, don't get me wrong, but then the media get a hold of it and they blow it so far out of proportion. Then everyone just whips into a frenzy and starts the snake hate again.
It is pretty weird, right? And they would not blink putting their kid into the car.
Say that again, sorry.
It is pretty funny that we have those kinds of visceral reactions to snakes and spiders and sharks and crocodiles, and yet we don't blink if we put our kids in the car or we take our kids to a friend's house who's got a big backyard pool with no fence. There's no kind of... You don't freak out and, oh my gosh, I need to blow up this pool and we're going to invert this car and set it on fire to protect the kids.
Yeah.
And yet with snakes, it's kind of as you say, there's 2 deaths a year, which are probably both farmers or people in such, restricted areas that are just so far away from the hospital that for whatever reason they didn't make it there, right?
Well, what's probably more of the attributing factor is they didn't know what to do once they were bitten.
Yeah.
So if you want to protect yourself and your family from snakes, we have these amazing medical facilities. We have anti-venom. These are all the contributing factors that are the reason why we have such small amounts of death in Australia from it. But the people who are, dying from snake bites, generally speaking, are people who just don't know what to do after a bite. So this is where education comes in, and this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. To help the species that I love, but also to help people. As I mentioned before, I'm a full-time firefighter. I care about public safety. So what my mission is to do is stop the conflict between our native wildlife and people. So I'm on both sides. And a lot of people sort of, I get a lot of hate on the internet because, I might appear to be sticking up for a snake when really I'm trying to educate the people about the snake so then they can take that knowledge away and use it, in a positive way.
You got to be careful, man. The internet's a cesspool of hate. I get it. If I drop the odd F-bomb or something, I get a lot of people, you shouldn't be saying that, mate. And I'll be like, well, it's English, dude. Chill out,
Yeah, that's it. I'm teaching people English.
So what happened? Can you tell us the story about when you were bitten and how many times has it been? Can I ask that? Or is that one of those things where you don't ask a girl her age and you don't ask a guy how many times he's been bitten by a snake?
It's actually the most common thing I get asked is people want to know, how many times you've been bitten, but...
Well, it's not going to be what's the professor's name? Fry or whatever, who's been bitten 30 times, and he's like, yeah,
there's people I know that have been bitten around 100 times, it's...
That's probably, $1 million worth of antivenom,
Well, that one person that I'm referring to actually just waits out bites. But, I don't actually recommend that, and we won't get on to that topic because he probably wants to, be remained anonymous. But all
good. So what happened with you, though, when you were bitten by Australia's most venomous snake?
Well, look, it wasn't Australia's most venomous snake. It was a mulga snake, or AKA a king brown, which is part of the black snake family. A lot of people don't realise that it's a black snake. And they don't have the most toxic venom, but they make up for it in sheer volume. And I was very lucky. I was trying to rescue a small, mulga snake. It was about 30 centimeters long, and it was on a busy road. So, whenever I'm out looking for reptiles, you try and take them off the road because road trains just come along and clean them up.
Yep.
So remove this snake from the road. And look, if I was doing this job professionally at someone's house, I would just use a welding glove to grab a snake that small and that venomous. Out in the bush, didn't think twice. I was trying to remove it off the road. Actually removed it off the road successfully. It came back onto the road. I quickly went to grab it, but it was almost preempted my grab. As I've grabbed it, it spun around and bit me on the pinky finger. Now, as I said before, these snakes make up for their toxicity by injecting a lot of venom, as they have the biggest venom yield of any Australian snake. So a big one is actually, a bit of a worry if one of those chews on you. But this one just gave me a small defensive bite. It only got one fang in.
Yep.
And I basically sat there for a minute because I had a great night of, photography and reptiling lined up with a mate. And, it was only at the very start of the night. And it was such a hot night. There was reptiles all over the road.
You're just like, do I roll the dice? Maybe it's a dry bite.
Yeah. And I sat there for a minute, but I knew from knowing about snake venom, I knew that the mulga snake's venom is painful. So I sat there for about 30 seconds to a minute. And then when I started to feel pain from the bite, I'm like, all right, let's wrap this up and get to the hospital. Lucky for me, the hospital was only 15 minutes away in the car. So we quickly applied the compression bandage, which is your standard snakebite first aid.
And how did you do that?
How do we do it? So it started from the bite site, which was down on the finger. So it's very easy. You just start at the extremity and work your way up as high into the groin or armpit as you can get. And you're wrapping about a third. You're going up about a third of the bandage each time. And the pressure that you should use is similar to a sprained ankle, just to support it. So all you're doing is compressing the lymphatic system. You are not cutting off the blood.
Yep.
This is a common misconception about, what you should do, because people used to go and do silly things like put tourniquets on their arm. Then they got to the hospital, realised it was a non-venomous snake, and they had to chop their arm off. So
I can't imagine how embarrassing that'd be. Or it was like, yeah, mate, it was a dry bite, but your arm's, been denied oxygen for the last 2 hours, so we're going to have to amputate. Sorry, buddy.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, because you didn't follow, proper snake bite protocol. So, I've been in this situation before. The friend that I was with had been in it before. We knew what to do. We knew how calm to stay. And then basically he drove me to the hospital. Because we're in a remote location, we didn't want to use up their resources by calling out an ambulance to us.
Yep.
It was just quicker and easier, better for everyone that he got me to the hospital via the car.
But you would say to other people, make sure you call an ambulance.
Well, this is the thing. If you're in a remote location, what you might want to consider is meeting the ambulance.
Yep.
So, if the ambulance has to come an hour and you have to come an hour,
yep.
You might be able to meet the ambulance in the middle instead of having that ambulance come all the way out to your property, which is, 200 kilometres away, and you're just sitting there. So, it is very important to stay immobilised when you're in the car. So moving is basically your enemy when you're bitten by an Australian snake.
And that's because it facilitates the movement of the venom in the lymph nodes, right? So that it'll get further into your system. Exactly.
So the venom, say I'm bitten in the pinky finger, the venom has to travel vertically up my arm until it reaches my lymph node in my armpit, and then it will be transferred into the blood. So because Australian snakes have very short fangs, venom isn't injected past the skin. It's trapped in the skin, and that's where the lymphatic fluid brings it up the arm into the bloodstream. So what can happen is if you do this procedure, to the T, and you follow it correctly, you can have vital hours before needing to reach anti-venom. And this is what happened to me. Bitten on the finger, went to the hospital. It was something like 7 hours before I reached anti-venom, because hospital that I went to, the hospital I went to didn't have black snake antivenom, and they didn't have what we call a polyvalent antivenom, which has all 5 types of antivenom mixed into the one, so that it's used if they can't identify the snake.
Yep.
So they just go, okay, here's the broad spectrum antivenom. It's going to cover all snakes. So they didn't have any of that. All they had was brown snake antivenom, which would have actually done some good, but it was no use. I wasn't showing any symptomatic signs that the venom was in my system. And basically the Royal Flying Doctors came to my aid, and they flew me back to Perth, which was 1,000 kilometres by road. So it was about 7 hours before I reached antivenom. And then the attributing factors that led to me not needing antivenom in the end was the fact that I'd only been bitten by a baby snake.
Yep.
It only gave a small amount of venom. I stayed super calm. I knew what to do. and then I didn't move my arm, not even a muscle, for 7 hours. So the venom...
That must have been difficult.
It was difficult, but, I knew that that's what I had to do. So don't move a muscle, don't tense anything, and the venom has got a lot more chance at staying localized to where you've been bitten.
And so what happens if you were to get bitten like that by that snake? Can you just wait out the venom? I don't know if you would call it disintegrating or anything like that. If you were to bandage your arm up and you for whatever reason couldn't get to a hospital or get anti-venom, would it potentially just get out of your system eventually, or you're pretty much screwed and you need to do something about it?
Well, you have to do everything you can do because you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So if you're bitten by a snake and you're just a member of the general public and you can't even identify that snake, you just have to go into snake bite first aid mode. So you just follow, the 10 or 12 simple steps in snake bite first aid, and then get yourself to hospital. Now, a lot of people ask me, what if you're in the bush and you're by yourself? Because everyone's fear thinks of the worst scenario possible. And they're like, what if you're in the bush and you're by yourself and no one is there to help you? So in this scenario, it's counterproductive to just put on the bandage and stay immobilized. If you do this and it's an extremely, toxic snake and you've been given a decent amount of venom, you might sit under a tree for 5 hours and then you're eventually going to die anyway.
You should have brought a shovel.
So you're not allowed to say the shovel word around me.
Triggered.
Bury yourself, so it's counterproductive to then follow snakebite first aid to a T where they say stay immobilized. You need to then get to safety. You need to then get to help. So if you're, in the bush and you're half an hour away from home, you would need to put on that bandage, that compression bandage, and then you would need to calmly make your way up to the house, trying not to keep your heart rate and your limb moving too much,
because that's going to make the venom move, and obviously also avoiding as many snakes on the way back to the house as possible.
Don't try and kill the snake that bit you and then get bitten several more times as well, and then decide you're going to run up to the house, and by then the venom's already in your system and you have a lot less chance of surviving.
Far out. Well, man, I've got so many questions for you. We've already gone for 45 minutes. I'll have to get you on again and harass you about cane toads and a few other things. But how did you get into the photography side of that, of reptiles and everything, and what have you sort of learnt about them since doing that?
Well, as I said, I started with the snake catching side of things, and it just wasn't fulfilling enough for me to continue doing that when I moved over to Perth. It's run a bit differently over here, and I'd always wanted to be a wildlife photographer. So in my own unique way, I just combined my love of travel, photography, and reptiles into one sort of passion. And then it came a bit of obsession over the last few years. And, I've been spending all my spare time on travel, on camera gear, on fuel money, on everything, as well as launching the Instagram, the Facebook, the online shop, all the social media outlets, to then go, hey, this is all the photography I'm getting. This is what you can learn by looking at a nice image of this animal. So, but I do it all for the passion and the love of it. If I can then come back with a beautiful photo that someone wants to buy and hang on their wall, that is quite humbling that someone wants that piece of your art in their home. But it's a very small reason why I do it. It's just basically the cherry on top. If I can educate the public with my photos and then, sell a few prints, which goes towards more camera gear and fuel money.
Oh, brilliant, mate. Where can people find out more about you then? Where can they follow you?
Well, you can follow me at Ross McGibbon Reptile Photography on Facebook. I'm on Instagram as Ross McGibbon Photography. And then I also have a website, which is rmrphotography.com.au.
Yeah, go check it out, guys. Definitely Facebook, man. I love the videos, and that was where I first came across you. I think it was, I follow Wildman, Damien Duffy, right? I've had him on the podcast before. He's a classic, and he's always like, whoa, spewing amazing with your stuff every time it gets up. I don't know if it's him that likes it or I like it, and then I sit, like, it starts popping up in my feed all the time. But you got some amazing videos in there, mate, so definitely keep it up, and guys, go check it out. So,
all right, thanks very much for having me on today, man. It's been a great chat.
No, I'll have to get you on again. Thanks so much, Ross. I appreciate it.
No worries.